you think the speakers when they show? This movement go, they last forever. Together we ride, never say never. The funding formula, no confusion, just the method. The funding formula, no more hustle without results. The funding formula, vision go fly, we get support. The funding formula, Africa rise, we hold the fort.
I am your host today. I'll be moderating. My name is Ebuka Onukwue. I am part of the team in Fundraising, and like I say again, it is an honor to be here and to have you here with us. The funding formula is organized, of course, by the Fundraising. Who are we? We are a management consultancy firm. We're based in Abuja, but our target is Africa, African NGOs, organizations. We want to see you prosper. We want to bring out the best in you. We're going to help you position yourself strategically to be the best version of yourself. And the funding formula 1.0 is one of our expressions. We have many expressions. I mentioned the toolkit and other things. There's a lot for you guys, just hold on. The funding formula is one of our expressions, and we realized during the course of our research that there is a lot of funding, there's a lot of money, let me use that word, available for organizations here in Africa. And we have people who have ideas. They want to implement projects that will change the lives of Africans. Yet there seems to be a dichotomy. There's a gap. It's like there are people cooking food, the food is available, and there are people who can distribute this food to others. Yet there are so many people who are hungry and don't even have access to this. So what's the reason behind this? This is what the funding formula is all about. I'm just paraphrasing or painting a picture. And that is what we aim to solve. It's a riddle. We want to crack it. And I hope that so far, you've been able to glean one or two things that will help your organizations from the first module, the second module, then today's module is going to be fantastic, I promise you. Now, today's session, today's module. Let me get my biro right here. Let me not say too much. Without further ado, the next video you'll be hearing, or watching rather, is about Femi Taiwo. So let's just get ready. My biro is set, my book is set. I hope yours is ready too. So let's hear who is Mr. Femi Taiwo.
Development consultancy serving private and social sector partners. Femi and his team at Fit Africa support impact-driven organizations through capacity building, institutional strengthening, strategy development, research, and program design interventions. Leading the group's e-learning division, Trace Academia. In this role, he was accountable for the division's team and mission across Africa and Europe. Femi was the executive director of Leap Africa, a youth-focused leadership development organization, for 6 years. In this role, Femi co-led the design and delivery of programs transforming millions of youth across Africa. This includes landmark partnerships powering youth development and the SDGs on the continent. For instance, the creation of the Youth Day of Service initiative, which has engaged hundreds of partners and over 7,000 youth across 24 African countries to execute hundreds of localized SDG projects. Femi is a 2018 Aspen Institute Ideas Fest Scholar, a Praxis Accelerator, and French African leader alum. He was part of the inaugural class of the Obama Africa Leaders Program. Femi is a recipient of the Junior Achievement Youth Ambassador Award. He serves as the co-chair of the Nigeria Youth Future Fund, a $6 million fund set up by the Ford Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, and Luminate to support young Nigerian change-makers, and on other boards including the United Nations Global Compact Network Nigeria. Femi holds an MSc in Innovation Management and Entrepreneurship from Manchester Business School, a BSc in Computer Science, first class, from Covenant University, and has completed executive programs at Harvard Business School. Please welcome Femi as he takes us through the third module of the funding formula, 1.0. Femi is an award-winning youth development specialist, social entrepreneur, and
All right, I think that's my cue. Good afternoon, good day, everyone. I don't know where you are, but I'm sure it's either afternoon or morning or evening where you are. So, karibu to the East Africans here, and hello to every other person. Right, first of all, I want to say a big thank you to the team at the Further Fem. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. And of course, to everyone that is on the call, thank you for making out time of your busy schedule to join this wonderful training. I know you've had very good facilitators in, I think, 2 editions already, 2 classes already. This is the 3rd class, if I'm not mistaken. And there's probably another class tomorrow. I hope I got that right. So I'm going to be running through something called winning the grant. So the brief that has been given to me is to speak a bit about application essentials. I know the goal is all about the funding formula, and a key part of how you get funded is your application. That's the way you communicate the excellence, the value, the creativity, and the innovative solutions that you have. So I'm going to be talking a bit about that. A bit about me: I've had the opportunity of designing programs, seeking grants, winning grants over the last 15 years. There was a time my team and I were trying to walk back and say, okay, how much have I participated in? Because it's not an individual thing. And I was like, okay, I've done maybe net of I've participated in close to net of at least above $40 million grants in different settings, different contexts, and different organizations over the last couple of years. But beyond being on the side of programming and looking for grants and trying to mobilize resources to be able to achieve some of the impact objectives that I set out to, or that I set out to together with a group of people. I've also been on the other side of reviewing grants, making decisions about funding in different settings, supporting different organizations to review and decide on capital allocation and the flow of development dollars. So I'm going to bring perspectives from both the recipient and then the steward of the grants, the giver of the grant, as it were. So very quickly, let's go into the session. Now, during the course of this session, one of the things we're going to go through is I'm going to help you understand the typical structure of a grant proposal. I know you all come from different organizations, you all have different types of programs, so I'm going to be bringing that diversity into structure. But we're going to explore the typical structure of a grant proposal and look at the purpose of each section. We're going to explore how to write with clarity and coherence and ensure that there's alignment with donor priorities. We're going to look at some of the common errors and pitfalls in grant applications. And then basically, holistically look at how you can present your ideas in a way that, just demonstrates and showcases strategic thinking, clarity of thought, impact, and sustainability. And of course, we will be talking about the concept of, baiting the hook to suit the fish, basically tailoring your proposals for the different types of funders and different types of partners that are out there. So very quickly, let's dive in. I know you've talked about this. I think Elizabeth must have talked about the funding landscape, and then Daniel sometime last week talked a bit about fundraising more broadly and resource mobilization. Now, in my organization, we approach this in a certain way, and I've approached this over the years in a certain way. And I felt, let me just do a quick reminder, which I'm sure the other two facilitators have talked about before I dive into the technical proposal element. So the first question is, what is fundraising? And I know that means several things to you. So let me just give you one other way or two other ways to think about it from the point of view. So the first is that fundraising is friend raising. I know Daniel particularly must have talked about the relational dimension of fundraising. That's beyond, technical proposals and, responses to RFPs, to requests for proposals, and all of these concept notes and everything. The real job is beyond even those documents. It's fundraising is fundraising, because the reality is that funders give money to those they know or those who they don't recommend, right? Now, this does not speak to nepotism. It just means that, are you visible enough? Are you, when they think about a course or an area, do you come top of mind? Because those who come top of mind, or those who are in their mind space, typically get their attention even before others, right? Secondly, fundraising is fundraising also means that resources flow in the direction of trust. And naturally, organizations, when you talk about shared vision, shared values, and common ground and trust, that speaks to friends, people that they've come to know, they've come to trust, and they basically elicit trust in the interactions and in the way they show up, right? Thirdly, resources flow in the direction of people they believe in. And many times it takes a while for them to believe in. So a form of interaction or whether directly or indirectly, it's already happening. And so fundraising is fundraising from the point of view of funds flowing in the direction of people that they believe in, right? So this has a lot of implication for you as an individual, as an organization, and as a project. It has implication for your public relations, for your brand, for your social media, for your external communication, for your stakeholder management, and your ability to just walk the room, and whether virtually and even physically, to make friends, to interact with people, to share your vision, to share your values, because that's how these things happen, right? So that's the first background I want you to have. Now, secondly, fundraising is storytelling. In fact, a proposal is a story. You will get to see very soon. That's a story. You're trying to tell a very clear, concise, and coherent story of what is wrong in the world, why it's important and urgent, how it can be solved, who can solve it alongside you. And that's basically what a proposal is. In a simple way, it's just a story. But beyond that technical proposal being a story and a tool for fundraising, everything about your organization tells a story. So fundraising is storytelling. Your social media is telling a story about you. Even the way you present your proposal is telling a story about you. Your LinkedIn is telling a story about you. Your board members are telling a story about you. Your auditor or lack of auditing is telling a story about you. How you show up, virtually, how you show up in the ecosystem is telling a story about you. And so you want to make sure that what the story that your technical proposal is saying is coherent and consistent with what your potential participants and beneficiaries are saying, and what your website is saying, and what your founders are saying, what your board members are representing, basically, right? So fundraising is storytelling. You want to tell stories that engage and touches their hearts and engages the heads of people. You want to inspire in them the possibilities that they can make happen together with you, right? You want to tell stories that are true, transparent, evidence-based, and reinforce integrity. So that's the background I want you to think about, especially this fundraising is storytelling, and your grant proposal is a story in its own self, right? So let me move forward. Now, one of the other things that we talk about and we teach about is the fact that resources, not funds, is just one aspect of resources. So I prefer using resource mobilization versus funding, right? Because some of the things you need money for, you can get the value of the same without necessarily paying cash, right? Some things you can get a building, like literally, you can get office space and lease for 5 years. You can get computers, you can get laptops. So resources are broader, than just money, right? And so when we talk about capital and resources, we talk about different forms of capital. We talk about intellectual capital, social capital, and before we even get to financial capital. So resources is broad, which is what I'm trying to say. So resources generally flow in the direction of three things. They flow in the direction of great institutions, they flow in the direction of great individuals, and they flow in the direction of great ideas. So let me reiterate that and I'll explain. When we say great institutions speak to the legitimacy of this organization, the transparency in this organization. It speaks to the structure, to the systems, to the governance. So, funders and resources. I know that there are different types of grants. There are the ones that they are de-risked and they are willing to just give 1,000, 10,000, to any kind of organization. They prioritize the individual and the idea. But real resources flow in the direction of great institutions. So my question is, have you tightened the aspect of great institution? Have you worked on your governance, on your financial system to show clear accountability and transparency? So everything around system structures, governance, and great storytelling, and all of those things is what makes for great institutions. But resources also flow in the direction of great individuals. These people that have a track record of excellence, a track record of results, whose passion is so audible and loud and relatable, who show up authentically, right? So some people, you call them donor darlings. So they become donor darlings. And that's where the fundraising thing comes across. They are trustworthy, they are believable, they've demonstrated passion, demonstrated excellence over the years. So great individuals is another aspect. And great individuals is the leadership team, the individuals running it, the project owners, the board members as well, and the individuals on the board. All that speaks to great individuals. But for the purpose of this session, we are focusing on great ideas. So money flows, resources flow in the direction of great ideas. So let me speak a bit about that, because what you're trying to communicate with your grant proposal or your concept note is great ideas. That's what you're trying to communicate. That's the story you're trying to tell with your grant proposal. So what is great ideas? Great ideas is quite broad, but it's basically clarity, clear and coherent storytelling. So a clear logical flow from input to impact. A story of what is wrong, what's the vision of the solution, the goals and the objectives, and how we would get there in a logical way. So that's great ideas are logical. There's a clear logical flow. It makes sense. People can follow it. This is how it works. There's a clear theory of change. This is how change would happen. These are the assumptions you are making for change to happen. Now, great ideas are also backed by evidence, right? They are data-driven, they are well-researched. And so these are basically the inputs that make for a great proposal. Evidence-based, data-driven solutions, data-driven stories, basically in your proposal. Great ideas are not just regular, they are innovative, in their approach, in the sense that they will deliver distinctive outcomes. So 10 people can react to the same request for proposal, but one will stand out because of their methodology, the innovative nature of their methodology. So an innovation is very broad. It could be product innovation, process innovation, service innovation, but it basically is about something, a novel arrangement of what exists in a way that it creates a distinctive outcome, basically. Great ideas also address key vulnerabilities. So they don't just scratch the surface and just put a band-aid. They address key vulnerabilities. And in line with key vulnerabilities, great ideas have the potential to drive systems change. So great ideas have a good appreciation of systems. They understand that problems are not linear, problems are wicked. They are very entrenched, and it's a big web. And so great ideas have a good appreciation of systems and are positioned to address systems in an efficient and an effective way, right? Now, the last point I want to make is probably one of the most important. Great ideas is not from your own point of view. I know that, yes, you are excited about your solution. You think that solution works. It's the best thing. And yet sometimes we are so crazy and so excited about our solution. But great ideas is not from your point of view. Great ideas is actually from the point of view of the person that will fund it, right? But that doesn't tell the entire story. Great idea is the nexus of is that middle point of what your funders really want to fund. So it's aligned with them, it makes sense to them, it ticks some boxes with them. Number two, it addresses the needs of from the participant point of view. If you focus on the actual needs of participants or beneficiaries, like some people call them, when you pay attention to it, and then you pay attention to your own unique mission and capabilities and core competencies, that nexus, that midpoint, that's where great ideas lies. So great ideas is a win-win-win. Win for the participants, beneficiaries, a win for your organization and your competence, and a win for funders, because it makes sense to them. It aligns with their mission, their own perspective, their own understanding of the issues. So funders are typically drawn to initiatives that reflect their goals. The reality is that I sit on, I've had the privilege of sitting on the funder side, and I sit on it still. And so, people do code emails or reach out to you, maybe they see you in a conference, and they're like, say, I'm thinking about this, and they start talking about, with excitement about what they love, what they want to solve. This problem is urgent and important. But what is urgent and important to you might not be urgent and important to me, because we have our own strategic framework. We have the outcomes that the funds that we've allocated are driving towards. And so if you don't fit into that narrative, it's not a great idea to us, because we have people to report to. We have people that we are accountable to. So you have to think from the point of view of your funders, to really reflect a great idea. So that's one thing you have to think about. One thing to note is that your grant application is not being read by beneficiaries. So the real person you want to tailor that writing to is the funder. Right? So I'm going to talk a bit about that as we go on, but we're just playing emphasis on the fact that you really, really want to bait the hook to suit the fish, the funder. So let's talk about project proposal. Let's talk about the grants. What are the ingredients, the major essentials? Admin, can you do me a favor? Can you tell me when I have 20 minutes left? Just let me know in the private chat to me when I have 20 minutes left, so that I can optimize basically and move faster. So let's talk a bit about what makes for a great project proposal. Your typical proposal, irrespective of your organization you're applying to, typically has things like this, right? Sometimes they don't give you a template, they just put out an RFP and then you have to submit using your own template. Sometimes they have forms that you have to pre-fill that have a bit of guidance, basically. Either way, you will find most of these elements and a bit more in a typical grant proposal or grant application. So let's go through this step by step, and then I'll use the next few slides to kind of expand on some of these concepts. One is, you will typically find a background or context. They will tell you, you might see background or context. So a great proposal definitely has a strong background and context. Basically, what happens here is the real question they're asking you, or the real thing you're meant to answer there, is why. I don't want to get ahead of myself, so let me run through this, then I jump straight to it. Then, what do you want to do? The goal and the objectives. How will you do it? Your methodology, theory of change, log frame. So what? Why is it important? So what? Impact measurements. What key learnings? Key outcomes. Who and what? Who, when, and what? Communication, stakeholders, budgets, timelines, a description of the participant. What if something goes wrong? Risk management. What if you try this? Experimentation and a bit of innovation. Those are the basic elements. That's what you're trying to. So you're trying to tell a very clear, coherent, concise story of why, what, how, so what, who, when, what if. That's what it is, basically. That's what you're trying to do. That is what you're trying to do. So let's start with why. That's always a great place to start, because that's the foundation of your proposal. That's the foundation of your grant application. Now, why does why matter? That's an interesting thing. Why does why matter? The reality is that you want to situate the problem or the opportunity in the context in which that opportunity or problem exists. That's where your background and situation analysis comes in, right? You cannot just jump at solutions. You cannot just jump at this is our goal, this is our objectives. You want to build a logical foundation of why. And what do you want to communicate? You want to communicate why a problem exists, why a problem exists, why it is urgent, why it is important, why it is solvable. And you want to do this using data, using evidence, right? This is the beginning of whether you understand, whether your solution will make sense or not, because it's the logical foundation on which every other thing stands on. Because if you don't get this right and don't do this well, you've already lost the foundation of coherence. Everything most likely will not make too much sense from this point of view. So what this does is that it betrays those who have thought too deeply about the problem, who have a good understanding of the problem. And a good understanding of the problem is what you need to be able to solve the problem well, for you to be able to develop transformative solutions. So this betrays those, it just separates those who are thinking at a surface level and those who have really researched the problem, who really understand the problem at a deep level, at the multidimensional level, and who can now overturn that mountain of the problem because they have insights. So this place is asking you for insights and insights that you're going to build your foresight of solution on, right? So insights about the problem. What does data say about the problem? Primary research, secondary research. What's your understanding of the problem, right? Before you even go about to, start designing solutions. So that's why this is important. It's your context analysis. You would talk about the quantity of the problem. You can quantify the problem. You can qualify the problem. You can describe the main root causes. You can describe. So it betrays your understanding and your analysis of the problem, basically. And that's what you want to communicate. Now, you cannot communicate it in the most concise way and in the most coherent way if you don't understand the problem. So this is why you need to do your needs assessment and needs validation well. And you need to do your problem analysis well. Because if you want to take that big, gigantic, wicked problem and understand it and communicate it simply. Simple is hard, but the goal is simple, right? So you want to go through all the motions, research, understand, do your needs validation, needs assessment. Maybe and then you are communicating, building a very strong context for it. Now, so what makes for a strong context, a strong background for your proposal? One is that it clearly situates the problem within its social, economic, political, or cultural environment. So problems don't stay in isolation. Problems are problems because things are making them happen, are resourcing it, are feeding it, right? Problems, so you want to situate it within a social, economic, political, cultural context, whatever it is. That's one. Number two, you want to show that you've done a bit of analysis. You want to show that it was your project or your understanding was framed by the participants, by the potential participants and the potential beneficiaries. So you're showing that some form of this assessment has been done or this validation has been done, directly or indirectly, some literature review. You want to draw evidence on the primary you want to draw evidence about this from primary and secondary sources. That's another thing you want to do. Number three is that you want to frame the urgency and the scale and the consequences of this problem. That's another thing you want to do. But don't just stay at the problem level. You also want to flip it and show the opportunity. You want to show the opportunity and the possibility, right? Of why it's easy to solve. This problem is solvable. This problem is addressable, and probably you want to show that other people have attempted it and they had some results. So you describe the problem, you explain the problem, you situate it well in the context, but you also situate some of the models and the attempts to solve the problem, the opportunities, basically the possibilities and the opportunities, right? When you're thinking about the context, you have to think about some people. It has to be human-centered. So we talk a lot and we teach a lot about human-centered design. You see, there's a difference between problem and needs. Problem is broad, and then you can situate the needs of specific individuals or archetypes of individuals within that problem. So you want to do, because you can talk about unemployment broadly, but you can talk about unemployment for girls. You can talk about unemployment for girls, but you can talk about unemployment for girls in rural areas. Different context. So you want to zero in as much as possible to the person you will ultimately be serving with your program. You want to, so you are also describing the problem and the context starting from that, abstracting upward from that individual that you, or the group of people you want to serve. Because if you are using urban statistics and you're describing urban context, and you're not saying that the person you want to target is rural, it doesn't make sense. It's not coherent, right? So you want to think about the individual. You want to keep the participants. You want to keep the participants in front of you. And best practice is that you will engage the participants one way or the other, no matter how, in your needs validation and your needs assessment, right? So this is what I always advise. Thanks, admin. This is what I always advise. You want to think about each paragraph as one of these. So you're building the architecture of your program, right? And of your proposal. Your context, think about it in paragraphs. Each paragraph should communicate a strong logical pillar and a strong logical context. So depending on the size of the grant and how deep the problem is, if you're applying for a multi-year project, that is very big for a multilateral organization, your context will be bigger, will be longer. So the size of your context differs from the kind of application you're doing and the kind of audience you're doing. Because if you're applying for, say, former USAID or a FCD or context, in fact, they can even tell you context should not be more than 7 pages. They're expecting your context to be well researched and robust, and things like that, and maybe 10 pages. But some other people, context is just 2 pages, and you have to articulate it within those 2 pages or 1 page, right? So it really depends on the type of funder and the type of. But you want to think about each main paragraph as a way to build, a strong point that your program and your goal will rest on, right? So let me just give you some bonus points. There are different ways to analyze a problem. You want to think deep about the root causes of the problem. Now, this problem tree analysis is linear. It gives you some insight into the problem, but that's it's just one way to analyze the problem. It's a linear way. Problems are not necessarily linear. And so I believe so much in systems thinking, and I think that you have to also leverage systems thinking tools and frameworks to be able to understand the problem. If you really deep dive beyond just linear thinking to systems thinking, you would have a better context, and you'll be able to articulate a better context for your program. And so this is one of the tools in systems thinking. It's called connected circle. It basically helps you to really understand the problem and do all this. Another thing to say is that, guys, nobody stops you from putting diagrams in your proposals. So I always encourage that you have to recognize that people are visual as well, right? So if you can diagrammatically explain what you are saying, please by all means do so. Do so even in context, even before you get into your logical model, your theory of change, which you should also attempt to use a diagram to explain and describe, right? Or your program model, basically, right? So just wanted to just show you that there were different ways to analyze the same problem, right? Now, remember the framework I showed you. Context is why. The next thing is what? What is now the solution? Now you've explained the context. You've explained it with evidence, with a lot of insight. So what are you now going to do about it? This is where you frame your program goal and objective. Pay attention to the fact that I said goal. There should be one broad vision and goal for your project, and then you can have multiple objectives. But one goal, everything leading to one goal, one true north, right? So the goal has to be clear, concise, and many times the goal is just a mirror of the problem statement. So think about the broad problem statement that you were trying to analyze, and the goal is going to come from there. You just flip it around and tweak it, right? So look at the example here. If there's no access to healthcare in rural areas, if that was a situation that you were analyzing, and then your goal might be to improve access to quality health services in underserved rural communities. Just a flip side of it. It basically is a clear, concise statement of your desired long-term outcome. So its goal is about long-term outcomes, impact, right? Long-term outcomes, right? And it's the core problem. It speaks to the core problem, just flipping it around. While objectives, right? Objectives come from the root causes. So when you look at your core problem, when you think about the many causes or the many things making that problem stay true, when you think about the root causes or the main issues or the main things driving that problem or creating that problem, you want to isolate your entry point. You want to isolate the things you think, if I tweak this, if I tweak that, if I tweak this, the problem will be solved. Those key things you want to tweak in the root causes are basically where your objectives will come from, right? You can see that even your logical solution and your logical coherence already starts from your problem and your context and how you described it, and then your objectives is already matching even your problem statement and all of those things. So the coherence is all there already in your project proposal. Now, once you're done with the what, you want to talk about the how. So you've written your goals, you've written your objectives. Your objectives are SMART. You guys, I'm sure everybody knows SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. You want to think about your SMART objectives from that point of view. Your objectives, just to explain, your objectives literally would form even the outcomes. We'll get to that, right? But so you now go to the how. You have so you've done your context, your why. You've articulated the what, which is basically the goal and the objectives, right? And even with the person you want to serve, then you go to the how. This is where you now talk about, you now explain your methodology, your program design, right? You build on the problem analysis you've done and the goal and the objectives, and then you really break it down. But at the high level, the strategic way to explain what you want to do, to explain the vision of your solution, is theory of change. So there are basically different things that goes on when you're trying to explain your how. You're basically explaining your program design. And one of the things that I should say is that program design is both a process and an output, right? So when you go through program design, what you get is a program design. Is the output is a program design, but the process is also program design. This process is collaborative, involves a lot of internal stakeholders and external stakeholders, is iterative, and is tentative. Programs are, you can't complete your program design even after you've submitted your proposal. If you win the grant, you tweak it, because it's tentative, right? A lot of new insights, a lot of new ideas will come, and your program is not stamped in stone for real. So just think about it from that point of view. And so in communicating your how, it's really communicating your program design. And all of the best practices of program design comes to mind here. The needs assessment I spoke to earlier, the fact that it's logical and evidence-based, and it's contextual and culturally sensitive. So you want to think about your program design for it, and you want to remember that you're designing for people. You're designing for people. So my assumption is that you've done a good job of understanding the needs, you've understanding the problem, understanding the context. You've done a good job of ideating on solutions. So don't just jump to frame a solution. This is where we miss it. There should be a systematic review of potential solutions to address the problem. Don't just use we always do mentorship program. We do behavioral change campaign this way. We're just going to do, we're going to do grants. We're going to make it a fellowship program. Can you do the due diligence of researching different program models to address the problem that you've identified? Do a systematic review of other attempts to solve that problem in different contexts, similar to yours or even outside of yours, that you can learn from. So you ideate multiple solutions. So you think about it from different points of view, and then you know that when you decided that this is what you're going to do, or this is the methodology, or this is the approach, it has been well thought through. It has been it's well thought through, and it's evidence-based, and there's a reason why you've chosen what you've decided to do. So in your proposal, you're basically describing your solution. You're framing the solution. That's the number 4 points, basically. Right? Another thing I want to say here is that as you are designing, remember you are designing for humans. Put people at the center of your design, right? So human-centered design. Put them at the center of your design. Put their needs, their aspirations. Pay attention to the humans, but also pay attention to the systems, right? And so I just put this here so that you understand that as a major part of systems thinking is also understanding the human dimension of things. I like the iceberg model in systems thinking. At the base of every system is values and mental models, which people hold about that issue. And so you want to think from that point of view as you design your program. Now, when we say your how, what are you communicating to the funder? You're communicating a strategic, logical evidence framing of your solution. And at the top of it is your theory of change. That's the strategic framing of your solution, the theory of change. And then coming down could be your result framework, result chain, or your logical frame, basically, right? So those are the things you are communicating, in your how. So let's talk a bit about theory of change and what are some of the things you should pay attention to. So theory of change basically is your program theory, right? Is the underlying theory of why your program is expected to work, right? At the very least, you should have a theory of change statement, but it's also good to visualize it, to think about to talk about the different pathways to your solution, from input to results, to outcome, right? Okay, thank you. They've added time to my session. My session is very deep, very, very broad. You guys asked me to do a lot of things. So yeah, I appreciate the extra time. Thank you. Just a second. If you have tea or coffee wherever you are, this is a good time to drink your tea, by the way. All right. So your theory of change is simply your explanation of how your resources are transformed through your activities into results. Basically, the flow from resources, inputs, through your activities to the immediate outputs they deliver, and how those outputs deliver outcomes. And of course, the assumptions you're making along the way. So it's a cause-effect pathway from resources through activities to goal, right? But a key thing to pay attention in theory of change is that for every theory you have, every strategy on how you want to make change, you have to recognize that you're making some assumptions. Those assumptions need to be clarified. What that communicates to a funder is that you've really thought through. Because that shows you're thorough. That shows you have capacity and you're experienced. Because for every theory of change, it's not a wish. We recognize that every project is in a way some form of experiment, and experiments have a setting in which they work. There's some assumptions and there's an hypothesis and there's an environment that this X plus Y will lead into X. There's a context that would work, and so you want to describe the assumption and the context, right? I don't need to define this. I guess you guys are, you're familiar with development language. But basically, when we talk about theory of change or we talk about, the logical framework, there are a couple of things we talk about. Inputs, which is the extreme left, the resources you use to do some activities that you use to do your programming. So whether it's money, staff time, tools, workbooks, everything you need to be able to do something. Activity is basically everything you do, right? That is directly your control to do. So you design a program, you do a documentary, you do an e-learning course, whatever you are doing to directly serve your participants. Outputs are the direct results of your activity, right? And so you want to clearly communicate these things. And then outcomes are the mid to short to mid-term changes that happen because of the outputs. And then then impact is much more long-term. Those are things to do. So theory of change basically just explain how your resources are converted to results through your activities in the context of the assumptions you are making. And you want to clearly talk about this, which using your theory of change statement, which is more or less is like an if then else statement of how you are moving from resources to your vision, to your goal, and the assumptions you are making. Or you're also you can show it diagrammatically. I'm sure if you Google theory of change diagrams, you see a lot. There's no hard and fast rule because you can describe it in different ways, but this is basically the flow of what typically happens in your theory of change. Now, another thing you use to communicate your how, and you should have by all means, is your logical framework, right? Because that basically tells me the entirety of your program, the entirety of your solution, right? It's a planning tool, consisting of a matrix that basically gives an overview of the goal, the activities, the anticipated results, and even some of the ways you know that the results, that you can verify that the results have happened. So it's like the word says, logical framework. It shows clear logic. It forces you to think in a logical way and describe your solution in a logical way and in a logical flow, right? So you start from inputs and work your way up to the impact that you're trying to make. So I have some examples here just for you to know, but there are a lot of tools you can download online to be able to do this, and diagrams basically you can use to do this. So it's basically if I have these resources, then I can do these activities. If I do these activities, then I can have these outputs. If these outputs are delivered well in terms of the quantity and quality, then these outcomes are guaranteed and they lead to the goal. One thing to mention is that as you go higher, upward in this diagram, in this stuff, your level of control reduces, because you can control to a great extent the input you put in, the activities you do, and the outputs. But when you start talking about outcomes, your level of control reduces, because you can train people, that's an output, or what they do with the training, that outcome is left to them. And so you want to think about how do you really convert from output to outcome. That's why your theory of change has to be strong, evidence-based, and the assumptions have to be clear, right? And you have to really explain that. So that's one of the things you're trying to communicate. It's very obvious to see coherence. It's very easy to evaluate the proposals from this point of view. The theory of change, it shows the logic. The log frame, it shows the thinking behind it. It shows the capacity of the thinking and the depth of thinking behind it. And you can really evaluate even from that point of view whether these people are really thinking about this thing well and they have the capacity to be able to do this thing to solve this problem. So you want to pay attention to this and describe it. But one of the things the logical framework and the theory of change is helping you to answer is that what are the key pillars, the key components? You might hear the key components of your program. So the key components of your intervention. You want to describe it before you even jump into the log frame diagram. A key part of your proposal is to describe some of the key components of your program. You want to describe it in a narrative way. Just write freely about it and say, okay, these are the different things we're going to. You want to explain it even outside of the theory of the diagram, to say this is how we're going to. For instance, if you have to enlist a lot of people before you choose your participants, this is how we're going to enlist, right? Now, this is if you are saying you're going to do a training. In the log frame, you might not articulate it fully well, but you will now say training. These are the modules we'll prioritize. These are the key skills, attitudes, and behaviors we are going to prioritize in our curriculum design. So that's where your narrative becomes longer, where you're narrating or describing very well, very descriptive, in a very coherent way still, the components of your program, right? But the log frame helps you to summarize it, and you should definitely have that in your proposal. Now, I know you run different programs. And so when you are thinking about the different types of projects or different types of programs that people do, some people do advocacy programs, some people do direct service delivery, some people, their program is research. The components of your program will differ, right? If it was advocacy, you definitely will have to pay attention to the situation analysis and policy analysis mapping. You will need your stakeholder mapping. Your communication strategy will be a major part of your descriptive components. Your coalition and partnership building might be a big part. Public mobilization strategy might be something you describe extensively, right? Just saying that different types of programs and different types of projects have unique components that you will double down on. If it was a service delivery, you will talk about the intervention design from the point of view of curriculum, technical design, the mode of delivery. You say, okay, is it going to be a club-based? What's the frequency of the club? How many students will be in the club? All those kind of descriptive dimensions, of what you are doing, and how you are going to do it is falls within this area where you're describing as drilling down and drilling down. If it was a research grant you were writing, you would talk about the ethical considerations, sample size, you talk about the data collection methodology and tools. So you can see that components mean different things for different types of projects, right? So just wanted to put out there. Similar for infrastructure development, different, capacity building, innovation pilots, and all of this. Right. So just to take us, we talked about why, which is the context. We talk about what, goals and objectives, the how, which talks about your program components, your theory of change, your log frames. Now let's talk about so what. So what is important about this project? Why is it so what? What are we going to learn? What outcomes are we going to deliver? This is where you now talk about impact measurements, framing impact. Impact measurement is not just summative. Note that it's not just summative at the end of the program. So impact measurement is formative, then summative. So your proposal is the formative part of your impact. You are describing how impact will be made, how impact will be captured, how impact will be measured. Right? It's clear. We're not waiting to see that at the end. It's clear. There's a formative, aspirational dimension of impact before we even talk about measuring it and trying to evaluate it. Right? So you have the opportunity of showing the formative part and also describing how you will do the summative evaluative part. So this is where you frame measurement. And so you want to pay attention. It has a good proposal talks about how impact will be measured, right? You want to be clear about the indicators, the KPIs. You want to make sure that to your donors that your project is measurable, it is adaptive, and it's sustainable. So it's not an afterthought. You want to think about the clear KPIs, the measurement frequency, You want to describe, how would you collect baseline? How would you do midline or headline? Just to show that you are interested in learning and interested in really delivering impact and outcomes. The key learning questions, these are things that you write. Your key learning questions, the clear KPIs at the output, outcome, and impact level, even at the activity level, you want to think about your clear KPIs. So your log frame or your result chain helps you to do that. And then to describe that to the founder in a coherent way. And so these are some things you have to also describe, the so what in your proposal, because it demonstrates accountability, it demonstrates learning and adaptation, it demonstrates strategic thinking. It's also you telling storytelling. It's also you showing that you're going to tell a good story and you're thinking about it already. And so these are some things to think about. What monitoring system do we need to set up? So you have to describe that. Who will be responsible? What will be the frequency? What documents will be produced? Is there going to be some white papers, some studies as part of this? What tools will be used to showcase impact? What system would you use? You want to describe this, in your proposal in a very succinct way. Of course, you want to make sure your indicators are smart. I've talked a bit about this earlier. So you're just making sure your indicators are smart. What exactly are you measuring? Where exactly are you measuring? Quantifiable, qualifiable. What methods would you use to measure, to collect data and evaluate data, and all of that, right? So these ones are repetitive. Because of time, I'm going to skip them. They basically speak to what I've said already about the fact that you want to make sure your indicators are smart. If you miss it at baseline, you've lost it. It's very difficult to evaluate properly. So you want to think very well about the baseline, even before your project starts. You want to think about what data points should we capture before the project starts to establish baseline, and how do we ensure that we capture data in real time and at different points to make sure that we can see this working, we can make adjustments, we can learn different things, and then let it inform program design. Remember earlier I said program design is iterative. And so people that really show that they understand what they are doing, right? Now, another thing you want to pay attention to is every program or every project and intervention creates a big opportunity for learning. So you should think about your learning questions. What can we learn? Why is that learning important? Who can we learn from? You want to think about that as you're framing your learning questions in your proposal, right? It's part of the best practices that you have to think of. I'm going to skip this because of time. It all speaks to indicators and smart indicators versus weak indicators and all that. So another thing you have to clearly describe is the who and the when. This is now the action planning in your proposal, the project side of it, to say, who are we serving? You describe it. Who are we partnering with? Who are the stakeholders? When will things be done? Your work breakdown structure or your timelines. So it's very important that you think about the key stakeholders. Very, very important that you think about the key stakeholders. Who will benefit from this program? Who can block or enable access? Who has the resources or expertise that we need? Who has social assets, or who have social assets that we can leverage? So you want to think about the entire stakeholder map of the interventions, because when you're solving problems, you are relating with people, right? Both the people you're serving directly, and then the people around the people you're serving. So you have to really demonstrate that you have a good understanding of the different stakeholders, because stakeholders can destroy your project. Stakeholders can hamper the results. They can. One of the big assumptions you make when you design programs is around people, right? And so you have to really, in a way, find a way to demonstrate that you have a good grasp of the kinds of people and how they can impact on your project, right? So there are direct participants, which are direct beneficiaries. There are secondary beneficiaries or secondary participants in your program. And then there's the community and the systems level beneficiaries that you can think about that are important for your results, for your long-term impact. So you want to think about that, and articulate what are the different key stakeholders and how you would address them, basically. You also want to describe in your proposal, you want to talk about the who's implementing the work, who will do the work. You want to talk about the team. You want to showcase that the team is power packed, they have experience, they have capabilities to deliver, right? So you want to describe the other partners, the other people in the consortium, the people in your team, the kind of human capital that will be deployed to deliver the work. This is also a good place to talk about that. in the what and when. Sorry, in the who and when. I've talked a bit about stakeholder management, but you guys know the classical 4x4 matrix that the stakeholder mapping to that maps for influence and impact, right? You can always check this out, and you can also use that in thinking about who is important. You also want to demonstrate your communication plan. How would you communicate with the stakeholders? How will you communicate impact to the funders, to the partners, and to the community? When you think about your media plan, all those things, these are some things you can think about and also describe in your project proposal. Are there some key timelines? Just to be sure that you want to make sure it aligns with the funder's priority and timelines. So you want to demonstrate. You can use a Gantt chart. You can, some of them would ask you to actually send a proper full worksheet of how your project plan and all of that, depending on but it shows your planning ability. It shows the feasibility of the project and how you strategically execute program. So the timelines, is one of the things you want to reflect on at a high level, at the very least, depending on the funder. You also want to think about your budget. How would money be? Because when you're submitting a proposal, you're submitting for a fee, right? For a certain amount. So you really want to show the key cost headers. And best practice here is that you budget by activity. You really think, if you've done a good job of program design and you've done a good job of articulating your log frame and the key activities and all of those things, there should be a clear line of sight from your log frame and all of those things to your budget, because you should just follow each other. You can literally say at the output level, this is how much you're spending, at the activity level, and all of those things. So you want to think about your template from that point of view and make sure you're capturing the true cost of delivering your program. For each activity, you're thinking about how the activity tries to the outcomes and what are the key resources that are needed, and you're breaking it down to staff time, to logistics. You don't, many times we make a mistake on the cost for M&E and communication. But if we've done a good job of really thinking about the proposal from this point of view, budgeting becomes easier and clearer to do. Yeah, so I'm going to pause shortly for questions. Another thing to reflect on is you are not doing your program in isolation. There are assumptions. Those assumptions are potential risks. And so you want to think about the risks. What if something goes wrong? What if an assumption does not hold true? And so you want to demonstrate that with a simple risk assessment in your program design. It helps funders to know that you've thought through challenges. It shows credibility. It signals strategic thinking. It signals capacity. It signals excellence, and that you've really, really thought about it holistically, right? So there are different types of risks. There are operational risks that typically happen. Financial risks. For instance, an organization that uses a template is Mastercard Foundation. And the template, I particularly like the template, actually. It helps you to really think. And I know that I've seen different versions of this template over the last, probably started doing things with them in 2017. I've seen different versions of it, and they keep enriching so that the template forces, potential partners to think through some things. So they have a risk management log that helps you, to think and ask questions of yourself about operational risk, reputational risk, political risks, technological risks, social and cultural risks. So there are different dimensions of risks that you can think about for your program, and just identify the ones that are important, that are high level and high impact, and then you articulate how you're going to mitigate those risks. Basically, that's what you do there. You talk about the likelihood and the impact. And for anything from medium up, or you want to at least spotlight it and talk about the mitigation strategy. And there are different ways you can do that in your proposal. Now, one thing to note is that there are different types of funders, and I'm rounding off now. There are different types of funders. So all of the things I've talked about are still contextual, depending on the type of funder. But the principles are the same. The depth of it might just differ from a proposal to the other. Some are quite high level that might not require that rigor, but every time you can even showcase rigor, it puts you at an advantage, I tell you. But the goal is you want to make it as succinct as possible. So one of the things I always encourage is use diagrams where possible to describe your program model, to describe different things. So it's easier. It's very difficult reading through grants. I don't know if you've had to read through grants. It's very difficult, right? Which is why fundraising is fundraising, because sometimes you might not have the capacity to do it well. But some of the funds I've raised, it was the funder already wanted to fund you because you've already fundraised. And so the program officer will work with you to make sure that proposal is done well. It could be 20 iterations of it. right? To get to the point where it can scale their internal processes. But just saying that but there are different types of funders, and there are different types. There are open calls, there are closed calls. Open calls will naturally be sieving people based on quality, based on technicalities, right? So you want to pay attention to technicalities. There are different types of funders and different types of nuances in how you communicate to them and how you interact with them. But I'm going to summarize this in the next few slides. What are some of the common errors that people make? And how to avoid it. Number one, very vague problem statement. I've talked a bit about this. You want to clearly define the problem with data, the root causes, the affected populations. You want to make sure that your problem analysis is targeted. Like I said, describe it. Start from the general, but bring it specific. Think about it like a funnel. You can start from general issues, but you must zero in. So think about it like a funnel. Right? Next is weak and misaligned goals and objectives. You've described a problem in a certain way, then your goal does not even make sense vis-a-vis the problem and the context of the problem. Your objectives do not make sense. So misaligned goals and objectives that do not reflect the problem described. That's another thing. Now, lack of specificity. Please communicate with clarity. Simple is hard, but simple is the goal. Your sentence structure, don't use too long paragraphs. Communicate simply and cleanly and correctly. I know this is a good point to talk about artificial intelligence. Use it with wisdom, because it can even put you in trouble. It can rant, I've forgotten the word they call it in artificial intelligence, but there's a weakness for AI tools to just double down in a certain way. All right, so you want to make sure that you use it intelligently, right? You don't want to use abstract, broad language. You want to start tailoring your language to the funder. You want to study the funder. You want to study their priorities, study the language they use. You want to study the language they use. You want to use the keywords they use, the words that resonate to them, the way they describe the issues in their own way. You want to use that. You want to avoid jargon. You want to avoid every use of technical language that you don't even understand, and internal language that only you understand. That's a big problem, by the way. People have a solution and they have the way they describe it and they use that word. No, explain it in the way, communicate for the user, communicate for the reader, right? And a very big problem is a missing logic flow. So there's no clear logical flow from objectives to impact, right? So that's where your theory of change and logical framework, you need to be a master at it and use it. Underdeveloped budget, overinflated costs, neglecting sustainability is a big part. You have to assume that they will not keep supporting the program. So your program design must be built with sustainability in mind. Some things, if not everything, must be able to go on even without the funder. Something must be a gift that keeps on giving as part of the program. So think from that point of view. Ignoring what could go wrong, risk assessment, poor presentation of formatting, obviously the technicality. Because 10 people worked on the grant, all manner of fonts, it becomes the map of Africa. Think about be excellent in your formatting, use Grammarly or whatever to help you make sure that your sentences are better, and your document is better aligned. Use of edits to make it readable. Readability is important, which is why I said use bullet points where you need to, use narratives, use colors, let it be easy. Pity the reader, have empathy for the reader. Right, please make it easy, make it sweet, make the person excited. The person will probably be drinking tea when they're looking at that. Okay, and many times, don't let me even tell you what goes on in some of these open calls. Open calls are the most toughest. That's why the real money doesn't go for open calls, apart from maybe multilateral organizations. That's because of laws and policy, they have to do that. Then another major problem is ignoring the funder's guideline. Trust me, that's the easiest way to just bounce some proposals. The technicality is the first way you screen away proposals, right? So you want to pay attention to that. So how do you write for clarity and persuasion? Just like I said, funders review thousands in some instances and dozens and hundreds of proposals. So a well-written proposal stands out, not just because of what it says, but because it's said clearly and convincingly, right? So you want to be clear, not clever, right? First of all, kudos to my team members. They're the ones that put together this slide. I like it. So avoid jargon, overly use of technical terms. I've talked about this before. Use simple, direct language any intelligent reader can understand. Paint a big picture, right? Big picture is good. So start with a strong, engaging overview before diving into details. Like I said, from general to specific, from divergence to convergence. Use evidence strategically, because even though we said use data, you can now, the data can be thrown, be slapped at the document in a way that is not clear, it's not coherent, it doesn't make sense. So use evidence strategically to make a point. There is no point to use the data if it's not making a point that adds value and gives you a point with the reader, right? So blend logic with empathy. So you're not writing for machines. Use data, but because you are designing for humans, bring the human element. So balance starts with the real human stories. You can throw in a case study to paint the problem from the point of view of a user or the point of view of a potential participant or beneficiary. Make it easy and obvious. Connect the dots for the funder. Connect the dots. Use diagrams. Make it easy. Stay focused and concise. Use active, confident language. Make it easy to scan through. So your table of contents, bullet points, all of those things, so that it's easy to go through. Hey, executive summary, guys. There are different levels a proposal goes through. It might start with some individuals that read it in detail, they also read a lot and they scan. And of course, they start reducing the number of proposals that go upward. But as it goes higher in the chain, executive summary now becomes more powerful, because that is all they will present. Most times, executive summary is all they will present to some of the final decision makers. Right? So you want to pay attention to your executive summary and do it well. And do it well. Thanks. And do it very well, right? Do it very, very well. Let that be the last thing, and really, 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 really make it clear, concise, and coherent at that level. It's the hardest thing to do, and that's why you should do it last after you've achieved that. So all I've said is a good proposal, a winning proposal speaks to the why, tells a good story of why, tells a good story of what, tells a good story of how, tells a good story of so what, tells a good story of who, when, what if, and tells a good story generally. So I'm going to pause here. Thank you so much. I am done. Alrighty.
Wow. I'm going to call you Professor Femi. Thank you very much. It was a lot. My head is blown right now. My notes are filled to the brim. Thank you. That was very insightful. That was very detailed. I mean, if this was a proposal, I would have, and I'm a funder.
Yeah, bring in the billions. Bring in the billions.
All right, sir. In fact, my only complaint is that we lacked time, because you had a lot to dish. I wish we had more time to just sit down and masticate on this thing you've given us. So we will jump straight to the questions. I hope we're good, sir.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So we have a couple of questions. Okay, we're a very lenient company. We like to share. We said everyone should ask on Slido, but I think this question is okay. We'll take just few questions from the comments, but this one is from Slido. It says, how can we present rural Africa's issues clearly and concisely to funders? And I think the person is trying to say that funders are not really based in Africa, and they can't really relate with some of the issues in Africa. So how do they understand their importance and the urgency? How would you advise this person, sir?
Okay. That's a very good question, by the way. If you recall, I said that beyond data, data is so common. Data sometimes is so when data is so common, it flies over people's head. So data might not tell the full picture, the true story. I think if you can tell the human angle, the human side, if you can say, and this shows you were at the grassroots in front. If you can say, this is Elizabeth, or this is Aisha. Aisha lives in this, and imagine if you have Aisha's picture with yourself. There's nothing stopping you there's nothing stopping that from being in your proposal. To say, this is Aisha. Aisha grew up in this. Aisha has this issue. and then you're saying there are many Aishas. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So you can communicate the human side, but blend it. So connect the human to the evidence, connect the human to the broader data. So you can start from specific to general, So that's one thing you can do. That's one thing you can do. The other way is to actually get the real, get a good grasp of the data and use the data to paint a picture. To paint a picture, especially a picture at the systems level, right? A picture at the systems level. And so if this is the problem, how does this problem connect to two other problems or two other issues that the funder might be interested in, right? And the honest truth is to say that all funders have an agenda, whether they say it or not. I know, yes, there's that altruistic thing that we also think about, but beyond that, the reality is that they also have an interest or an agenda. It might be a learning interest, it might be a data interest, and so if you can really think from that point of view and communicate. But I think a good blend of human plus data, can communicate the depth of it, and the urgency of it.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. I think I'll add that anybody can relate to a good story that's told. Anybody, no matter where you're from. So thank you very much for that. Okay, another question. They say many strong proposals still fail at the value proposition level. So what exactly is your competitive advantage, not just in delivery, but in being funded over others doing similar work? Competitive advantage when you fail at the value proposition level. I don't know if you got the question clearly.
Yeah, so I get this guy's question, or this individual's question. He says that value proposition is not necessarily that your solution is successful. So he's saying, assuming the solution is good, but from the strategic value proposition level of the funder to say, okay, we want to back this person versus these other people, even though they have similar solutions. That's it. You've asked the question from a very good point of view to know that there's probably other things that goes beyond the technicality. And that's why I said resources flow in the direction of great institutions and great individuals. So what are some of the things that makes you stand out? And how do you start positioning differently at a great institutional level and a great individual level? So for some funders, money will flow to those who are influential, right? Money flows towards people that have influence. And this influence might come from executive presence, brand presence, and brand reach. So your ability to always tell a good story and be visible is also of value to a potential funder, because they know that, this money will go further, right, than what with this individual versus this other individual. So that's an attribute of a great institution. Another attribute could be the catalytic nature of a potential grantee. So imagine if I give this money to this individual versus this individual, but with this individual, it has a bigger ripple effect in the ecosystem because of their role in the ecosystem and how they position in the ecosystem to serve. I would rather give that individual who will be more catalytic, that investment is more catalytic. It will have a bigger ripple effect in the ecosystem. Smaller grassroots organizations might be supported. Other people will learn because of the way this organization has positioned. So it still speaks to influence and stewardship, right, in the ecosystem. But the other attributes, one of these, actually remove these slides. This was based on Stanford Social Innovators Review, and it was on the slide, but I had to remove some slides. And it talks about 10 attributes of great organizations, great nonprofits that get funded, right? So these are the extras, because they serve the ecosystem. So the resources that are invested in them is catalytic and reaches other people. Of course, they tell good stories, because stories is one of the ways you drive impact and change. Other people are learning from the stories. Other people are being inspired from the stories. So those are some of the things you have to do, apart from the other things I described, like great institutions. So people get the money just because they have better process, they have better governance. That's very common. They have better governance, or they're positioned, or they come across as they have better governance and better systems, and they're more professional in how they do it. Sometimes it's the individuals. We just believe in the individuals that said, think about the individuals also. And you describe, you know what, you see some names, I'm like, okay, this consortium or these individuals are part of this project. Okay, I will give it to that money because there seems to be more capacity. Some of it is perception, right? But I guess this is part of the things you do to be able to stand out stronger and stand out better.
Thank you very much again, Professor. I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions, and we'll have to allow you to take your rest and enjoy your tea. Okay, so someone is saying for a fashion designer that has a strong executive summary, what is that thing the proposal lacks that don't get one to the final stage? In the executive summary, you emphasize a lot about the executive summary, and I think the person is also adding that funders don't really pay attention to the fashion industry. That's true, and she put a crying emoji. It is true. What should be included to at least convince more funders that this is an industry that they should look into? Okay.
So Aisha, very good question, Aisha. Aisha, let me tell you something. There's a lot of money pursuing creative sector right now. So you want to pay attention. Maybe you're not looking in the right places, but there's a lot of resources being deployed in the creative industry right now, much more than ever before. So you want to pay attention to that, and fashion industry is an integral part of that. Now, number 2 is that there might be a misalignment. You might be submitting, you don't want to waste your efforts and submit a proposals to everybody. You might be submitting proposals to misaligned partners, people who have other interests. And trust me, you cannot really force your own passion on the passion of the funders. They know what they want to fund, they know what they're interested in. So you want to find people that have shared values and shared vision with you, people that are much aligned to your interests. Those kind of funders, because those kind of people will see value in what you're communicating. So far, what you're communicating is good. Now, another thing to say is that what else can you add to make your value proposition stronger? There's a lot of resources pursuing climate. So you're a fashion designer. Can you think about climate and fashion, environment and fashion? What materials are you using that is saving the planet? Or how can your fashion save the planet? Think about it that way. So you expand the pool of who you can reach out to. I mean, I once bought, I went to the UK for something, and I bought a trouser from Marks and Spencer, all because that trouser was made, they wrote it there. The marketing was that it was made from 20 bottles, recycled bottles for that trouser. I bought it just because of that. In fact, I have a bottle here. I can't find it now, but there's a water bottle I have somewhere in this office that I got from Mauritius like a month and a half ago. And the bottle was made from recycled materials, and it's fully biodegradable. It's a bottle, fully biodegradable. Plastic does not decompose, but this one, if you bury it, it decomposes, right? So, what's the other angle? What is the other angle for your fashion? That you can sell, that you can upsell. If you are talking to a partner that is interested in addressing unemployment, you need to show a pathway from your interest to the interest of the funder. How does fashion, or how can fashion at scale address unemployment? How can fashion at scale, address environment? Because fast fashion is killing the environment. I'm just saying, just think about the other angles and really tell that story and really deepen your program, your solution and your intervention from that point of view. Ebuka, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, sir. I'm going to create a shirt with glasses. I hope it will sell. Okay, please, sir, just
sure.
permit us. Can we take 2 more questions?
Yeah, sure.
All right, thank you very much, Professor. Okay, you have only 3 pages to write a concept note for a $2 million grant. I like this, guys, very practical. So what are your non-negotiables for inclusion? What are the things you should not put into it? And what would you deliberately leave out to maintain strategic focus and clarity? I love this question. I would like to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Very good question. By the way, when you get the $2 million, just remember the further firm and other people in the call. Anyways, you can think about your concept note or your proposal or even your program as a pyramid, right? Many things in life can be described with a pyramid. basically a triangle in this context. At the top of the pyramid is strategic, right? At the middle of the pyramid is tactical. And at the base of the pyramid is operational, right? Which is basically also in management, strategic leadership or management, middle-level management, and then operational, and for this 3 pages concept notes, you definitely don't want to bother about operational. So you're not going to talk about the when and the how. Sorry, you're not going to talk about the when and the program planning. That's for project proposal. Concept is really you have, as the name implies, concept note is about the concept. So you are focusing a lot on the strategic dimension of the concept, and then a bit of the tactical. That's where you stop. You don't come operational at all, right? So number one is your why. Your why has to be strong. Concept note still needs a very strong background and context. It's just that you have smaller space to write it. So your why has to be spot on. Your why. And then your what is what you are describing, and your how. Those are the 3 things. Why, what, and how is what you are describing. At the concept level in a very rich way. And you make sure that it's coherent. Your understanding of the problem, the scale of the problem, the size of the problem, flip it, the size of the opportunity, and blah, blah, blah. Then what you are going to do, how you are going to do it, and maybe a bit of why you're the best person to do it. That's all. That's what I'll focus on. Don't bother about timeline. Don't bother about so much about the stakeholder, all those other middle parts. Just focus at that level, right? If you can throw in one diagram, by all means, please do. Don't bother about risk assessment. That's operational. All those things, all those ones, take them. Don't bother about that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's take one more question. Okay. Jaja, yeah, you just talked about risk assessment. So Jaja wants to know if it is necessary to add risk assessment to your proposal, because maybe you put a risk and it could turn off the funder.
It's making you look bad. It's risky to put the risk, right?
Yeah, it's risky to put the risk.
I get this question. That's a very good question, actually. But my answer is this. It shows a quality of thinking and thought. It shows that you're very strategic, you're very intentional, you are holistic in your approach and thinking for you to have thought about it. So it's not risky if you've put a proper mitigation plan. You don't just identify risks. You put your mitigation plan, and that the reader is comfortable that, first of all, you identified it. So I trust you more than the other who is silent about it, or who doesn't even know that risk exists. And then I look at your mitigation, I'm like, okay, this guy is, that makes me more comfortable. So by all means, please put it. It shows, it just removes you from the pack, basically. It shows you as another level.
And it was wonderful. What do you guys think? I think it was wonderful. Let us tell him thank you in the comments. Thank you, Mr. Femi. Wonderful session. We are the Further Firm. We want to tell you thank you for participating, every one of you that joined today. So once again, thank you for joining us. It was awesome to be here with you guys. I say au revoir, bye bye. I don't know which other language. I didn't ask you guys about bye in your languages. So bye bye. See you tomorrow. It was a pleasure having you. So from all of us at the Further Firm, wish you well. Au revoir.
Chasing dreams like fireflies in the dark. Big hearts, big goals, we're lighting the spark. Building bridges where there's no map. Turning passion into impact. But where do we start when the mountain's so steep? How do we leap when the river runs deep? The funding formula, the key to the door. Unlock the future, let your vision soar. Step by step, we're breaking through. The funding formula, it starts with you.